Today, we have a coaching call with Lindsey, who is well on her way to financial freedom. Welcome to Richer Soul, your journey to a more purposeful, intentional, amazing life. Where are you going to go and how are you going to get there? Let's figure that out together. At the core is the financial well-being to be able to do what you want, when you want, how you want. It's about personal freedom and abundance. Lindsey is closer to achieving abundance than she realizes, and she probably needs to up her goals. Let's meet Lindsey and see how we can help her achieve abundance. Today, we have a coaching call with Lindsey. Welcome to Richer Soul. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Rocky. Excited to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Can you share a little bit about yourself and where you're at currently?
Sure. So, young 30s. Been working since I graduated from college at 22. I'm from California originally. Went back east for college, met my wonderful husband and love of my life in college, and we stayed out there for another 8 years where I went to school, basically. Found a career in the software industry. I was a chemistry major, so I never thought I'd head in that direction, but graduating during the recession, jobs were tight and needed something to pay the student loans that I had incurred. Took a job offer, which ended up being, in hindsight, one of the best decisions I could have made. Not to mention living out east was one of the best decisions I could have made. Recently moved back to Southern California about 1.5 years ago. Now we're adjusting to a new life out here. And I forgot to mention, newly expecting family. So we have baby girl due early September.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Let's take kind of a step backwards. Can you tell me a little bit about growing up and the financial conversations and teachings that went on in your household?
Okay. Well, the long pause here is due to the fact that there really wasn't a lot of direct financial teachings from either of my parents. Love them to bits. Great parents, lots of love from them, for me and my brother. But we didn't have the best examples of money management. It was a taboo subject, I'd say, and it was kind of avoided as a direct conversation. The funny thing about growing up, though, is I grew up in this dichotomy in kind of several ways. First off, I'm a first generation American from my mom's side. She came to the US when she was in her young 20s, and so did her family. So growing up, we had this totally different culture than what I was growing up in my mom's side. And so we were exposed to that. And then on the other side, on my dad's side, he was born and raised in the U.S., very, as American or Californian as you could get. He has families and siblings who actually have done very well for themselves. And so my mom's side, we had one culture. My dad's side, we had another culture. We were like kind of in the middle. But from that experience, I know what it's like to see wealth. I know what it's like to not see or not live in a life of wealth as well. We tended to live probably more towards the lower middle class, is what I'd say. And as much as I hate to say this, I grew up somewhat envious of what some of my other family members had. It wasn't like spiteful towards my parents. I knew that they did the best they could. But that was the extent of our teachings, I'd say. Just being exposed to different types of environments, nothing ever really direct about money.
And probably not much in school either.
Oh, for sure. Not much in school. No.
It's classic for so many people. And unfortunately, that's what creates the issues later in adulthood. And that's why I always like to just get a base understanding of where everyone's coming from. And when we can overcome that and take the time to learn about using money as a tool, then life becomes quite a bit easier.
I agree, and wish that I would have learned, as young as I could have, but it's never too late. So I'm thankful to have been exposed to this. I'll say RBT specifically has kind of led me in a different direction, and all the people I've interacted with, mostly online and various books and such, have led me in a much better direction than I probably would have been headed otherwise.
Absolutely. And it's constantly improving yourself and learning that helps you to achieve that. As we look at where you're at currently, and I looked at your balance sheet and your expenses and everything else, you're doing great. You've got a good income. Even though you're living in a high cost of living area in Southern California, your expenses are pretty low. So you've created a lot of margin and you've been able to save and you've continually saved. So you've got a pretty decent nest egg started for your age. It's actually, you're probably way ahead of most people as far as that's concerned. So you should feel comfortable and you should feel happy that you have achieved quite a bit of success already. And I don't know if you realize that.
I don't, and I appreciate hearing that from third-party perspective from you. And I know my husband will appreciate hearing that as well, because we work hard, and we're both working on improving like more and more. And it does help to get feedback like that. So I appreciate that.
You're doing well. So be happy on that.
Cool.
All right. So there were a couple issues that you wanted to chat about. And I guess let's start with the first one, which is that you have a child on the way.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure what your plans are when your baby comes as to your work and your taking care of the child situation.
Well, it's timely that you bring this up, because my husband and I had a conversation about this yesterday. So it's been on our minds quite a bit. I can tell you as of now, the plan is, I'm very gracious in that my work gives me 3 months full pay. So I'm going to take that when the birth happens and spend that time with the baby and hopefully get some sleep, but we have no idea what we're in for. So take the 3 months, use the rest of my vacation days and throw that at the end, and max out as much time as I can with the baby, with our child. That'll take us into the new year, so beginning of January, when I would have to return back to work. And that's the plan for now is, I'm going to return back to work. I have, of our two jobs, my job's the stable paycheck, every 2 weeks, get a paycheck sort of thing. So it's essential for us that I work. But the one other positive caveat is I do work from home. And so I don't know how this is going to flow when we get there. We'll see. But what we're thinking is getting some hired help in our home for maybe 4 days a week during the hours that I have to work, and seeing if I can adjust my work schedule so I can take off a day a week and kind of so we don't have to pay someone 5 days. We're going to see how that works, or see if I can get a family member to help out. Probably do this until the baby's about 9 months or so, until next summer. And then my mom works for the school district, so she'll have 2.5 months off, which means she can help out. And I'm volunteering her right now on the air, but like we've also talked about it. So hopefully she's still up for it at that point. Have her come during her summer vacation and help us out, which allow me to work as well. And then when we get to about a year, we'll reevaluate, see how everything's working, and we will open up the potential for daycare or some other option.
Okay. Have you looked into what the costs of all these different options are?
Yeah, so a little bit. I actually had Fancy Hands do some research for me recently, and it looked like in our area we would pay, I mean, for daycare, there was a pretty wide range. So I'm not sure if that's reflective of quality or not, but anything from $200 to $450 a week. And for a nanny or someone that comes into the house, it seemed like it would be at least $400 a week, and probably can climb upwards depending on what your needs are and who you hire.
Absolutely. There are other choices that you can look at, I guess, depending on school times and so forth, is to hire college students or some of the other types of people and be flexible in that. It's not easy. Your housing situation, is it set up in such a way that you will have a space for you to work that's conducive to work, and a space for your child that's conducive for your child to not interrupt you?
Yeah, we actually do. We moved into a renting our place, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. And so I have one of the bedrooms dedicated an office, and now guest room. The once former guest room is going to be the baby's nursery.
You're not used to this yet, but there'll probably be lots of noise coming out of there, probably after about 8 or 9 months.
I'm sure you're right. Unfortunately, both the office and the nursery, the baby's room, are right next to each other, and we're in a ranch style floor plan, which means everything's one floor. So that's something I'm going to have to figure out as we get to that spot. But at least in terms of separated space, we're pretty good.
Okay. The first 5 years are the most difficult. They are, because you've got a child that relies 100% on you. Once they get to school, it gets easier because they're gone for a good chunk of the day, which gives you the ability to get all your work done. It's that in-between time till they hit 5 that people struggle. That's just what it is. It's life.
Yeah, I hear you.
So you've checked out a couple of different things, and it sounds like you've got good family support, which is nice. And then it's possible. Do you have other family in the area that might be able to help with childcare, or that requires childcare as well?
None that require childcare, but I do have other family in the area within half hour, 45-minute radius or so. When you said college students, you reminded me of, I have a younger cousin who's in college about 10 minutes from here. And again, not to volunteer her on the air, but she's a potential someone we could talk to and see if she could come like a day a week or something. And we have some options. We're here near my family now. That's going to give us something to work with and something to think about. It's a matter of asking for help and kind of accepting it too, because I don't think we've ever been in a position like this before.
You have to ask for help, and that's just the situation. The reason I was asking if there was someone else who needed childcare is sometimes you can share the cost of a nanny across 2 or 3 kids. And even if you have a friend who's in the similar situation, then you guys can share the cost of a nanny. You bring down your cost by half. Because you're each paying half of it.
That's a good point. Okay. Think about that.
So one of the other things, you're Are you okay with renting in Southern California? You're cool with that? Or are you looking to make changes real estate wise going forward?
It's an interesting question. I am so 50-50 on it right now. I'll tell you why. First off, where we used to live back east, cost of living was so much more delightful. I'll say that. What we're paying in rent is pretty great for what we have and for our location. So I'm not complaining by any means. It's just when you have that experience before and you move to an area of higher cost of living, it does kind of bite you a bit, especially for someone who has bigger goals and dreams and stuff. And so that is to say, I am happy renting here. We've had some issues with the house that have required money and effort to get addressed. And I am thankful that it's not something that we're, responsible for financially at this point. Not to mention all the other hidden costs that we don't really see. But on the other hand, and then also the housing market in the Orange County area is just pretty, I guess, tremendous in a sense, in that it just keeps going up and there's no real signs of slowing down. And so I don't know what to make of it myself. Part of my frugal mindset is it just seems so much like a buyer's market that I don't want to, seller's market, sorry, that I don't want to attempt to buy something now. But on the other hand, you always get the conflicting messages that, well, it's only going to go up. So that being said, I'm probably more comfortable renting, kind of keeping an eye out, seeing what happens, saving funds for a down payment, which is what we're doing. And if there's an opportunity for us to strike, then we strike at that time. And if not, we just keep renting.
And that sounds like a wise decision. I don't know how the market there reacted in 2009 and how much it went down during that period of time. That would give you an idea of what you can possibly see. I know over the decades, California real estate has a tendency to swing up and swing down quite a bit. I don't know if it still does that like it used to. And the reason I brought that specific question up is because on an episode that will be coming out, I think right before yours, we talk about when you live in a high cost of living area, that it sometimes makes a lot more sense to rent because the cost of renting is a fraction of the cost of buying. And then if you feel the need to buy real estate, you buy it somewhere else and you rent it out. So you turn it into a cash flowing asset for yourself.
Okay.
And so you still can participate in real estate and gains. You just do it in a market that's more favorable to you versus in a market where the economics don't make sense and you're actually better off renting just because of the costs that are involved.
Okay. That's an interesting take on it. Can I ask you a question about that?
Absolutely.
We've also discussed, and I've never considered it from a residential perspective. I think that's where you're coming from. So buying a place and fixing it up if need be and renting it out in a lower cost of living area. We've discussed, and I think this is going to be a little bit harder to do due to the initial cost. We've discussed purchasing a commercial property while renting. So we wouldn't buy a house here necessarily, but considering purchasing a commercial property elsewhere in a lower cost of living area that has more potential for growth and doing it in a similar manner to what you just mentioned.
And that's perfectly fine. I think it's more the concept versus the situation.
Got it.
Because of what your husband does, that probably makes a lot more sense for you than it does for someone else because he's already got experience in that marketplace. He knows what it is. He has contacts. He has the skill set to do that. And he understands the numbers in those areas.
Okay.
So that's a perfectly viable plan.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, that's what I was curious about, the details sort of.
So speaking of your husband, he is in commercial real estate. You've moved, so now he's reestablishing himself in a new area. He also, in that type of business, is 100% commission driven. And I know you're smart enough that you're actually putting money away for future expenses so that you don't have to worry about it. So you have reserve funds set aside for that, correct?
That's correct.
That's pretty awesome. It helps to balance for the future so that you don't have to worry when the bills come in, how am I going to pay this? It takes a lot of the psychological lifting off of you and says, we have a plan, it's in place, it works, and we're good. Do you have any questions or concerns about the way that you're doing that currently?
I can't really think of any offhand. Part of what makes this tough and almost essential for us to do is that my husband doesn't receive a regular paycheck. And so we can count on my income, and we try to live off of it basically. And we're not quite, with my income, we're not quite there. So we do have to count on some of his to fulfill the savings for the next year. But I don't know, is there any other things that we should be thinking about? We're still, I guess I'll ask this. I contribute to my retirement fund. It's not company matched right now. I work for a small company and we're not at that point right now, but I do contribute, not as much as I'd like, but a pretty substantial amount of my paycheck to our 401k. Everything else goes to living funds or other savings funds. We have a baby fund, for example. We haven't gotten to this point yet, but we are thinking about baby's college. And so we have to start thinking about 529 plans. When I start thinking about all this, it seems like our cash flow starts dwindling quite a bit. And I don't know. Does it make sense what we're doing based on what you've seen on our balance sheet and cash flow?
Absolutely. What you're doing is you're building a solid base, and you're doing it quite well. Are you happy with because when I look at your spending, I mean, you do go on nice vacations. You do things. Are you happy with the way you're spending your money?
I'd say so. I'm not, there's nothing for want from me. I probably tend to be less of a spender in my just overall being. My husband probably goes more in the opposite direction. He's not a big spender, but he'll be more inclined to have fun, and I will be less inclined to spend to have fun, sort of. We do make a good balance because of that. Yeah, for me, I don't know. I feel fine where we're at. I'm not for want.
Then in that case, you're probably good because it's working for you. You don't feel like you're missing out on life, which is the concern. You're enjoying life as it is. You're still saving a good chunk of money all the time, which is good. When the baby comes, I know everyone wants to go out and buy all this brand new stuff for a baby and all these brand new clothes and all these brand new things. And the funny thing is for the 6 months, the first 6 months, the baby doesn't even know it exists, right? It doesn't know if it was brand new or secondhand. And within a year, they outgrow this stuff. And people spend a fortune on all these baby things because they think that's how to care for their child. And they spend a lot of money that doesn't need to be spent. And a year from now, all that stuff gets thrown out unless you're planning on having a second kid. If you take the approach you're taking towards your life to your child as well, and look for ways to get the things, because if you go to garage sales, they give away baby stuff. They just want it out of their house. They're like, just take this. Thank you.
Yeah.
So spend appropriately on that. With regards to college savings, I wouldn't worry about it at all. I would focus on you getting your financial place in order. And based on the way that you're doing it, you should be in a situation that when college comes around, if you need to pay for college, you can just stroke a check.
I see. Can I ask you something with regards to that?
Sure.
And I know this is pretty timely based on where you guys are in your life as well. So I appreciate that advice. But what I was curious about was, are there any, my understanding is that there's some sort of tax benefit to opening up like a 529 plan, and that could be beneficial to us like down the line. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
There are some minor benefits to opening up a 529 plan in the fact that the money grows tax-free. Some states do offer you a discount off of your state tax if you open up a 529 in your state. I live where you used to live, and our state tax is pretty low. It's about 3%, 3.5%, which to me is like, okay, that's nice, but it's not enough to make me move the needle. You are in a much higher state tax situation, so it's a 9% differential. And I don't know California's rules, so you will have to look at California's rules. The thing is, once you get into a 529 plan, your investments are limited. So you've got to look at what investments do they allow. There are a whole bunch of fees that are buried inside of there. There's that issue as well. Whereas if you were to just go out and buy an S&P 500 fund today and hold it and not do anything with it, your taxes on that fund are minimal. So what you're actually saving is very little. The only time you get taxed on that is when you cash out to pay for college. And based on your income levels and your spending levels, you guys could literally stroke checks today for college if you didn't have to save. You're going to be 18 years from now, you're going to be 18 years of wealth already built up, and you won't have to worry about these things. So I have 0 529s for my kids. I'll be up front. Years ago, we did open up another kind of account. I think it's Cloverdale's for the kids. And actually, I'm rapidly spending them down while they are in high school to pay for high school tuition. So I have $0 going into college. When I go to college, I don't want them to see that I've saved a bunch of money for college. I want them to say, hey, I got no money saved for college. This is all my retirement stuff. And I've told my kids, guess what? If you're smart enough to go to college, you're smart enough to pay for college. Go find scholarships. Go be a good student so that you get help from the college, and go find a college that's a good fit for you at a cost that you think is reasonable. So I'm teaching them to be an adult and be ready for college and not just expect that mom and dad are going to pay the bill. So it's a mindset thing.
Totally.
You have to decide what you want to do for your child. Everyone is different. That's just the way we do things.
Okay. That's fair, and that makes sense. I appreciate that. And it's something that we do have a little time to think about too. So
you have a lot of time to think about it. Right now, the biggest thing for you is you build your foundation and get yourself strong. You can always add later if you want to, and it makes sense based on your situation. The other thing is, and this is what I don't think people realize, college, I think, is going to change dramatically 18 years from now. It's already starting to change. And I think you're seeing a massive shift in the value of college and whether or not it still makes sense for every kid to go to college, and whether or not the cost of college has gotten so high, people are saying it's just not worth it anymore. There's so many other programs that are out there that you can take and pay for that may be much better. So let's redefine the question to you. If I said to you, you have $200,000 and 4 years to educate your child. They're 18 years old. Looking at the world today, what do you think is the best way to teach them at 18 with $200,000 budget in 4 years?
Wow, that's a pretty big question. I don't know. The default has always been college, but I think it also depends on your kid's strengths too, and like what they're interested in. Because if you might have a kid who just really doesn't do school or doesn't, that's just not, maybe they do well, but it's not something they're interested in. They're more interested in real world experience, then maybe you go a different direction with them, or maybe you do some travel. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure.
So you have 18 years to make that decision.
Yeah.
You can start thinking about it. And what you think about now may be different than what you think about in 18 years. The point of that whole conversation is a 529 plan locks you into a certain track with certain expenses. Just saving money on your own and having it fully flexible, you have the ability to do what you want. And knowing some of your skill sets, you may be better off buying a commercial building that is paid off in 18 years and cash flows college.
Interesting. Okay.
Because you have the ability to do that. What's a better deal? A building that cash flows, pays off college, and then turns into an annuity for you, or putting money in a 529 plan and giving it to the college?
Oh, 100%. The real estate. That's my intuition. So yeah, I see what you're saying.
Another thing I want to congratulate you on, you and your husband are having conversations. You're on the same page. You're talking about money. That in itself is dramatic. So I encourage you to continue to have those conversations and then start thinking about these types of things from alternate angles. So what's a better way to pay for college? And in the short term, you're going to have to make choices about schooling. When your child turns 5, how do you want to educate them? What are your goals for education? Who's going to be responsible for that? And how are you going to do those things? So you have 5 years to kind of work on that as well. I think from a kid's standpoint, there's a Chinese proverb that says something along the lines of, show me the child of 7 and I will show you the man. Over these next 7 years, be very intentional in how you teach and parent your child.
Okay. I certainly want to do that and not keep them in the dark, even about subjects that may be tough to talk about. So that's reassuring to hear. And I know you have a couple interviews with folks about talking to their kids about money, which is really cool too. So it's a great resource.
Yes. And if you go back to the one episode, he started teaching his kids about money, I think at about the age of 2. And I know we started closer to about 4 or 5, but it's something that you do at a very young age. And clearly, you know the value of that from having grown up the way you grew up to now having this knowledge and being able to share it with your child at an early age.
Definitely.
With regards to your husband, and so it sounds like he is already considering doing investing within his line of work. What I would do is start to have conversations about what other opportunities does he get exposed to that he can then leverage into other revenue streams and bring about deals to increase his income so that he's got revenue streams that are consistent despite the real estate. Does that make sense?
Kind of. Just the way I understand the question is, and maybe there's other answers to this, but are you kind of saying, what does he know about the real estate market that he's in that is a great opportunity to buy and to jump on? Use that as a income generating stream. Is there any other way to? So
that's one. He will, because of his business, he will be exposed to opportunities, and some of those opportunities come where they're very time bound. So if you have the opportunity to act quickly, you can take a time-bound activity and get a substantial discount to market. So that's one thing. Number two is building relationships with financiers, the people who have the money, so that when opportunities come up to put deals together, he can help to put the deal together because he knows money people who will come in and fund his deal. So he's more likely to bring a deal to close. The other thing is, as you're going through the process of buying buildings and doing things, it creates opportunity in that everyone who buys a building probably needs certain services. Do you have opportunities within that area to connect people, to provide services, to do things that will generate more revenue stream? So I know, like, one of my real estate agents, her husband is he does the title work. They sell homes and he provides the title work, so it brings revenue stream into there. Others might have a property maintenance business. So as someone buys a building, you say, oh, do you need property maintenance? Well, hey, guess what? Here's a property maintenance business that I'm involved in that can help you with that. So it's trying to do is taking the situation you're in and look at around you to say, what other revenue streams could I possibly build or be involved with to grow my business?
I see. Thinking outside the box a little bit.
Way outside the box,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Instead of saying, all I do is this, say, I'm doing this and all these other people are making money. Is there anything out there that makes sense for me that I could make money off of as well?
Okay. Yeah, I don't think we've had a conversation like that before. This is a new concept, at least to me. So that's something that we can talk about.
Now, the other thing is, I think you said he's in retail commercial space, correct?
That's correct.
So that's storefronts?
Yep. Various storefronts and strip centers and single tenants or multi-tenant properties.
So how is that market going? I'm not familiar with that market. I don't have experience in it, but I'm hearing, when you read the news, you always hear Amazon's killing the retail place. He's at the front line, so he should know the trend.
It's funny you ask that because I think we have an industry magazine at our house that has the cover. I think the cover says something to the effect of retail is effed. Not going to say the word. I looked at it the other day and I was like, does this bother you at all? When you see the magazine cover like this? And he's like, basically to your question, I think we hear a lot about that in the news and certainly in a lot of different areas, but there's always going to be a need for retail. There's always going to be a need for a Rite Aid, for example, or a Walgreens, somewhere that you can pop your head in and get whatever item that you need to your door ASAP. And I know Amazon's trying to do something similar, but I don't know how long it's going to take for them to deliver within an hour at a pace that makes sense. And certainly that might be the direction we're going into. I'm sure it is. But I think it's going to take time to get there. And there are certain types of retail centers that are trading hands. The growth is pretty tremendous still out here. There's certain types of retail centers that probably aren't going to succeed. More specifically, big malls and such are getting repurposed. And I know that's not what he focuses on specifically, but that's an example of something where that's trading hands quite a bit. From what he says, it sounds like there's going to be a need for it for a while. There's going to be a need for people to bring, I don't know, whatever electronic supplies to the local store to get fixed, for example. Like I'm just thinking about like a cell phone or electronic shop or something. There's certain services that you can't really replace with an Amazon at this point. That's a sentiment. He could probably answer the question better than I can, to be honest. And if you wanted to chat with him about it, I can certainly connect you.
Okay.
But
I'm asking the question more from a long-term income stability question.
Got it.
There's a saying that says, go fishing where the fish are, right?
Right.
More apt to catch them. In the area that you left, one of the biggest real estate booms that's going on here is across every highway, they're putting up these mega trucking centers. And they're doing it because they are within hours of DC, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York City, Boston. Right. And they are literally these are all hubs for all that retail that's being delivered, through Amazon and all of that, and moving those things along. The real estate agents who are involved in that market are making money hand over fist. Just think about and look at the trends in your industry to say where in commercial real estate are the biggest fish and where is it easy pickings, and you may have to pivot. And it's something that you don't even necessarily have to do, but it's something that you can start to pay attention to.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Something to think about as well.
Yes. And those are big deals. So, and you mentioned repurposing malls into something different.
Right.
So if that's big and that's booming right now, being able to pivot and say, wow, this is big, I want to get involved in all that's happening over here.
Yeah. Okay. Staying on top. So it's not staying on top. It's like seeing where the future is going, which can be a little bit hard to do sometimes.
It is. But a lot of times, if you actually look at the numbers, you'll see, we all know that the mall is dying. Now, in some areas, the mall dies and there's nothing going to come replace it. It's just life. In other areas, the real estate's so valuable that if somebody comes in with a good business plan to do it and knows how to do it, they can make money hand over fist, bringing that opportunity across. So that's what you're looking for. And I think in Southern California, no land is just going to sit there empty. People are going to find a higher and better use for it. It's being able to bring that excess value to that situation will allow you to make a lot more money.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I have a feeling you're right. We don't see empty plots of land very often around here.
Not in your market.
No.
So the next thing I know you wanted to talk about was your parents and their future and how it relates to you.
Yeah, that's a bit of a tough subject, but it's something I think, I guess we have to think about it. I'll let you get to the question specifically in a second, but the reason why I'm wondering about this is we've started to see the impact of our grandparents and their situations on our parents on both sides. And so I don't think it's ever too early to think about that from that perspective. Just to try to be on top of it. I mean, and we're all living longer these days. So, I mean, there's lots of years hopefully left in all of our parents' lives. But that also brings with it some of the complications of how do you support yourself and how do you support your parents and your family when we get to the advanced ages and stuff.
It's difficult. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
So, in your case, is your father working?
Not currently.
Okay. Has that been something historical, or is it just something as of more recent?
I don't want to say historical. I think he's worked the majority of his life, but it's not a recent affair either. It's been about 3 years, 3.5 years that he hasn't been working, which has definitely had an impact on our family.
Does he talk about it at all, or can you have? Because here's what I'm thinking, and I kind of get it. When you're older and you go into job situations, they look at you like, "Oh, you're too old. We don't want you." It's just the reality of the workplace many times. And if you take that mentality that I'm too old, then you get in a mindset that prevents you from success. And I don't know what his particular situation is.
I can see it, a lot of it, a big deterrent for him, for sure. I think the problem, I guess, for me is that it's not something we can talk about easily. It's not something he necessarily wants to talk about, and if we try to hint at it, to bring it up, like on the phone, for example, even in person when we've tried, it's kind of, conversation shifts very quickly elsewhere. And there are times, though, when he is able to say a little bit more, and what he sort of indicates is that he's not happy where he is and ideally would be earning a paycheck. But for whatever reason, he's not at that point. I don't know what he's doing, if he's applying to jobs, if he's looking. So my assumption is always the worst, that that's not happening, because we can't talk about, like, we don't really talk about it.
And you're not going to be able to convince someone who doesn't want to talk about it. I think the only thing you can probably do is share stories, which is basically, oh, I saw this about someone else who's 62 and they were struggling with this and this is how they solved their problem. And not even say you should do this, but just tell a story. Mm-hmm. And let it go. And see what happens. The good news is, I think he's 62 now, correct?
Yes.
So in 3 years, he gets Medicare.
Yes.
And you can sit down, and he's actually eligible for Social Security pretty soon. The only problem is if you take Social Security at the early age, you get much less per month than if you take it later. And if you do take Social Security earlier, you cannot work very much, because if you work, you have to pay a massive tax back to Social Security until you hit a certain age.
Okay. I didn't know that. That's good to know. Okay.
Social Security planning in and of itself is a big, massive industry. And there's plenty of articles out there with regards to that as well. So he has to look. It sounds like, so are your grandparents still alive?
My dad's mom is.
Okay.
And my mom's mom is, yeah.
Okay. So you've got longevity genes. So there's a good chance that they will live a good long time.
Yeah.
And deal with that. Do you have any questions around that or concerns that you want to chat about?
Well, I think the most helpful thing you said was the telling stories suggestion, because I want to find a way to try to open up the conversation and say, ultimately, like, I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to listen. If I can help, I will, if you want it. Because in the past, I haven't been good at doing that. I've been trying to fix problems or pointing them out too often. So I think my family assumes that of me as well, but I've learned a lot since. It helps to hear that telling stories is a way to kind of maybe engage in a better fashion and then see if that does anything. The one problem I had with telling stories was I don't necessarily want to tell stories about me, because I don't know, like, how to, certain conversations might be a little tough to bring up with my parents. with regards to like emotional well-being and stuff. But if I can tell a story that's not about me and that's about something I read in the newspaper, for example, then that might be that's going to be much easier for me to do. So I do like that suggestion.
When you do it, I would just tell the story and not expect an outcome. Say, oh, I saw this story. I thought you might be interested in it. It's about so-and-so who did this. Here you go. And walk away.
Okay.
What about with your mom? Is a better line of communication there to talk about your dad, or not much so?
I wouldn't say much so. She's much easier to communicate with in general. When it's just us talking about anything else, like it's totally a 180. Even though she lives with my dad, she doesn't know much either. And she doesn't want to pry or push because doesn't want to come off naggy. Since he doesn't really want to talk about it, she just doesn't know.
Okay.
So yeah, that's not a line of communication we can go through either.
That's fine. So
yeah.
Okay.
I do have a question now that you also mentioned that before. I guess where I'm concerned, and maybe there's nothing I can do about this anyway, but my parents bought their house many years ago in a favorable market to buy a house. That being said, they've acquired a lot of equity in it. They're still paying it off, but they've acquired a lot of equity in it. That could be a potential windfall if something were to happen, like they could sell the house and whatever. But if they do that, they're not going to find a place to live that will be remotely cheaper. They won't find a single bedroom or a studio apartment that's cheaper in this area at this point in time. In that sense, they are kind of locked from selling their house. So what I'm wondering about, and this is like a worst case scenario, and I don't like necessarily want to like assume this, but what happens if they run out of money and they can't pay for the house anymore? I can see if we keep trending in the same direction that this is what may happen.
That is a numbers question where you have to sit down and understand the numbers. So the first question is, your mom still works, so she's making X amount of income. I think you said she works in a school, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean her job is pretty much guaranteed?
Yes, I guess so. She's been there for like 20 plus years. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they're living on her income, or are they spending beyond her income?
I think by default spending beyond her income, but living on it.
A little or a lot?
Definitely.
Or you don't know?
I don't know. I want to guess a little.
So the couple things you can do is, even if he can find part-time work, that'll take the edge off. Once he starts getting Social Security, depending on how much he's earned in the past, that may take the edge off and provide income in. That should hopefully be there. Do you know how much they have left that they owe on the house?
I think about 70,000, somewhere around there.
And how much is the house worth?
Probably over 500,000, over $500,000 for sure.
All right. Simple and straightforward answer.
Yeah.
What I would do in your situation is stroke a check. If you get to that situation, don't let it get behind. Do it immediately. The moment you know they can't make the payments and things are about to go bad, stroke a check, pay the mortgage off. Okay? And then you become the mortgager on that property.
Okay.
So they owe you. You're never going to throw them out. They can live there.
Yeah.
Whether or not they do or they don't, or no matter what happens, at some point, the house is going to come essentially to you, right? You have a brother?
Yes, I have a younger brother.
So maybe the two of you each stroke a check for $35,000. And one day in the future, however many decades from now, you will have a house. You're not going to lose money on this deal. The only thing I would do is when you strike your mortgage deal is make sure it's in such a way that they cannot get a reverse mortgage without you knowing about it.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yep.
Because you don't want them to then.
Yeah.
That would be my suggestion to you. It's the simplest, easiest thing. And you're in the financial situation that you can do this without too much of worry.
Okay. It's not something I've considered before too. So, okay. Something to talk about with my husband. So
cool. Here's another question for you. How good is Dad at being a grandpa?
I don't know yet. This is a first time for all of us. I'm sure he'll be great.
Well, if he's great and you need someone to watch your kid 4 days a week and he needs a little bit of money, you're solving two problems.
Right. Yeah, that's certainly a direction we could go into. Okay.
Maybe it's split. Maybe he does 2 days a week and someone does 2 days a week. Maybe he does this and that. It's giving you options.
Right. Right.
How big is their house?
3-bedroom, 2-bath, I don't know, 1,200 square feet or so.
So it's
pretty
not
standard ranch house.
It's not very large.
Yeah, not large. It's similar in size to the house that we live in right now.
Okay. Thought process, and I don't know the demographics of your area and the cost. I know out in California, they have a tendency to tear down stuff and put up big stuff on top of it. One possibility is to think about probably down the road is to do that with their house, that you could both live in the same house and have space and separation for each of you.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Multi-generational.
If you're rebuilding it or adding on to it, you do it in such a way. Well, actually, so in this case, you could add on to it. You could put a new second story and build a suite upstairs, or they could live downstairs and you could live upstairs, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And that seems possible. And I think this is where it gets complicated, is trying to limit the commute. My husband's commute to work. It's in the wrong direction, but okay. That's a little thing. But I mean, it is something. It's an interesting idea. It's something to think about.
All we're trying to do is look at choices. Here's the bigger takeaway. As you start to see one option, you go, oh, I didn't think of that. Then we see another option. Oh, I didn't think of that. Then we see another option. And we just start going down different options. It's kind of like peeling the layers of the onion. So, oh, we're not stuck. Here is an option. Oh, and I didn't think, here's another option, and continuing to do that.
With your idea, I never take anything off the table. That's an interesting option. I like the way you put that. We're just peeling the onion back. And you have introduced a couple ideas that we haven't thought about before. So this is certainly going to lead the way to further conversation.
Cool. So now I'd like you to think about something. You have a certain relationship with your parents, and it's one that prevents communication. Think about how you're going to raise your child so that you don't have this issue in the future.
Yes. That's really important to me. Bringing up difficult conversations isn't something that comes naturally to me, but thank goodness for the growth mindset, because I'm trying to work on that more so than that's one of my strengths right now, but it's something I'm working on. And I want to make sure that my kids have the ability to talk to me about things that are not easy to talk about, and vice versa. And I'm getting practice with that with my husband as well, which is nice. He's naturally much better at it than I am. It's a good experience for me to bounce ideas off of him.
Very cool.
And to talk to him. Yeah.
So when you look at your child, there are 4 phases that you're going to go through. 0 to 5, they're kind of very dependent on you. You've got to teach them everything, and every question is why, and it's your job to answer. And give them good, solid reasons instead of because mommy said so. It's teaching the core values at the beginning. 5 to about 12, they're kind of in school. They're learning on their own. They're starting to get things, and it's kind of all coming together. They're self-sufficient. Sometime around 12 to 14, they make another pivot. And they start to question why. They start to think for themselves. And from that stage up to college is where you can really work on that growth mindset, really introduce them to a ton of things and help at that stage. And then come 18, it's setting them up for college, helping them decide where they want to go, and then kind of sending them off. If you look at each stage as distinctive and then say, what do I need to do in each stage, and then what do I need to do in this stage to build for the next stage?
And that's something I'm assuming I can start thinking about now, right?
Absolutely. Now is the perfect time. Because if you don't do it now, by the time it's time to do it, it's too late. So the biggest piece of advice I can do is make friends with people whose kids are about a year older than yours and about 5 years older than yours. And then look for really great teenagers. So by talking to people whose kids are a year older than yours, you're going to find out what problem your child is going to have in a year. Right. So if you have a 1-year-old and you're talking to a 2-year-old and they're fussing over potty training, you go, okay, what can I do now so I don't have their problem in a year? When you look at a parent 5 years ahead and say, okay, what are they doing and what problems are they facing that I could fix today so I don't have that problem in 5 years? And by finding successful teenagers, you can talk to their parents and say, how did you make a successful kid? What did you do when your kid was my age? Just learn from other people instead of trying to figure it all out yourself. Use their mistakes and prevent the problems that they're experiencing.
Yeah, that's great. I hear you have teenagers, by the way. So
I do. It's great. People look at me funny. Nope, not at all.
Cool.
My daughter actually went to a lot of RBT meetups. And I think she started going when she was around 13, 14.
Oh, that's neat.
And she will actually be at Forefront this year.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
she might be the youngest one there.
She most probably will be. She is used to being the youngest person in the room at a multitude of events. Because we do not say, oh, you're too young to go do this. We say, go do this now so that you're 10 years ahead of the curve.
Yeah. So does that mean that she's developed the skills to communicate with adults or folks older than her? And
absolutely.
That's super important because I did not have that experience when I was a teenager, and kind of digging out from that now. I think that's super cool that you're doing that.
So you already know the experiences you went through as a child. Figure out which ones you didn't like, which ones you liked, and fix them for your child.
Yeah.
And don't follow what everybody else is doing.
All right.
Because then you'll end up with kids like everyone else who miserable teenagers.
Right. Right. Cool. Okay.
So you have a big goal. You want to save, I think, $1 million in a period of about 10 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Is
And
that
it seems
is that above and beyond what you already have, or is that the goal including what you have?
including what we have in savings. And I think I specifically mentioned I want to accomplish this goal while maintaining our savings to our retirement funds. So there's a couple nuances that I'm not 100% sure on, and maybe you can help with. I'm not completely into any specific movement, but I like some of the concepts of the FIRE movement, and I think they can be pretty powerful. From that, at least that's where I came up with this goal and mentioned it to my husband, and he's like, all right, that's cool. Like, that's something it makes sense to strive for. It's not like I'm doing this and forcing him to do it. I've just never been a goal person myself, except for the one thing I accomplished was like paying off my student loans ASAP. Apparently, when it comes to like money oriented items, I think that allows me to focus a little better. That's how I came up with this goal. Let's save $1 million in 10 years. Let's get ultimately to the point where we can live off of, what is it, like 4%, live off of the 4% of those funds. And if we, still have to work, no, that's fine. Like, I'm fine working. It's not a big deal. But it does give us a little bit more flexibility, which is what I value. Yeah, that's the idea. I would like to, it probably would be closer to, if we wanted to live off of our funds, 1.5 to 2 million for the 4% based off of what we're currently spending, plus a little sum with kids. But that's the idea, if that makes sense.
Your goal's too low.
Oh, wasn't expecting that.
You're literally already going to hit that number in 10 years with what you've already got saved and the path you're going. I haven't run the exact numbers for you, but if I were you, you know how to use an Excel sheet, correct?
Yeah, not the greatest, but okay.
You've already got your base number. You sat down and you figured out what you have saved. Start there and just take a growth rate that you think is comfortable. Whatever you think you can make is a decent return in what you would think your investments would do. So if you want to use, say, 8%, okay, and just see what happens to what you have over 10 years at 8% growth. 8% goes into 72 9 times. So in 9 years, you will double what you already have.
It's not even contributing further.
Correct. And you're contributing. And you're contributing a lot. That essentially tells me you're going to blow through this goal. So why not just make the goal 2 million?
Okay. Can I ask you something?
Sure. Ask all the questions you want. Don't even just keep asking.
All right. When you say we're contributing, I've got my cash flow up here. And are you looking specifically at the monthly or yearly amounts of the excess spending / saving value? I'm not sure if you have the cash flow statement up.
I do. I think what I'm looking at is, so you have money going into 401ks.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do have, I think I was looking at the spread, and it wasn't totally the bottom number, but just the fact that, you have a current savings number. Is that what you save per year?
It's an estimate. So in the cash flow statement, that's the estimate of what we save per year. Yeah. And there's some variability just on my husband's part, but like, that's a good average, I would say.
So just think about that. If you take that number times 10, you know what that is.
Right.
And then you add in the fact that the current money you have is approximately going to double. That's going to tell you where you're at. And then this money is also going to compound. Just looking at it, eyeballing it, 1.5 million is probably about where you're going to get.
Okay. At our current pace.
At your current pace.
Got it.
Here's a couple other things I want you to think about. If you have $2 million in assets in the bank and you're 41 years old, you're going to have a very difficult time drawing that down emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to say, I have this nest egg. I'm 41. I need it to last till I'm, just pick a number, 91. You're going to hesitate. On the other hand, if your husband has a cash flow commercial building that's throwing off $80,000 a year, you will have no problem spending it. And that's not to say have one over the other. Have both.
Got it.
And let this just kind of grow and get your real estate to create the abundance in life that you want in the meantime. And you may have to pull out. So let's say this is going to grow to 1.5 million. You might say, okay, I'm going to pull out half of this and put it into cash flow assets. And then I can live off of that cash flow and I'll let the other half of this just grow untouched. By the way, now that you have 1.5 million in 10 years, in 18 years, you will have about $3 million, rough number, which is when your kid's going to college. If you have $3 million, do you think you can stroke a check?
I hope so.
You hope so.
Yeah.
So don't worry about the college fund.
Yeah.
Worry about building this.
You're bringing some interesting ideas to the table. Where my mindset is kind of like, I guess where I'm like hitting a roadblock here is I'm seeing it as an or statement almost, in that if I save towards this goal of, let's say, 2 million per year in 10 years, then that's all I can accomplish, versus saving however much money for down payment for commercial property. It's hard for me to see both happening at the same time.
They don't have to happen separately. Our goal is to save 1.5 million in 10 years. If a great commercial property comes along, we're going to pull some of that money out and put it into this commercial property because it gives me a higher return and a better outcome than sitting in this pot of money.
Got it.
Building the 1.5 million is to build the assets to do what you choose to do with them. You can convert it if the opportunity, let's say the Southern California real estate market collapses and you see massive opportunity to go buy a whole bunch of real estate, then maybe you go do that. But you've built the base to be able to do this. Having the money as a goal doesn't do anything for you. Having the money to be able to do what you want is what you're looking at.
As a tool.
It's a tool.
Yeah.
We're not building this to stare at it in a bank account. We're building this to cash flow so you can have the dinner parties and take your kid on trips and do whatever you choose to do.
So that being said, now that makes sense to me. And then I have this other caveat with the retirement funds. Okay. And I'm curious, is it the same concept? Do I keep putting in, I think I'm putting about 10% of my income into 401k right now. Do I keep putting in the 10% to the 401k? Do I increase it? Do I decrease it? Because I think there's going to be opportunity in the near future. My ideal situation, I think, is just to keep that steady. I've learned to live without that money for all intents and purposes, so it's not like that big deal anyway. But then that's extra money that could potentially go towards the strategic acquisition of property, for example.
Most people make the mistake of putting all their savings into a retirement plan. Then when the strategic opportunity comes along, it's all locked up and they can't access it. You've got to sit down and spreadsheet for yourself. Go have the conversation with your husband. If we do this, what does it look like? What's the number? How much money do you need to do this? How many years out are we? Okay, let's build the pots. So you want a pot that is in a retirement kind of segregated. That's your safety pot. And then you have another pot that's you're building for opportunity. Whatever that opportunity is, I don't know, you don't know, but when opportunity comes up, I have an opportunity pot.
Okay. Okay. And that's kind of what we're doing right now, but
and that's what I saw. Yes.
It's more like, no, it's not blind, but it's a little like we haven't spreadsheeted anything. We just kind of like, okay, this is what we feel like we need to do. We still need to save for retirement, but we also know at some point either we may buy real estate in the form of a house. We may want to instead buy a commercial property, but it's going to be strategic. And the other thing, actually, and this is what I want to ask you. So we did this not on accident. We talked about it, but it hasn't been like structurally planned. We called this savings fund a strategic fund. The other purpose for it, other opportunity, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, is if we see opportunity in the stock market, which I feel like will be harder. I'm curious if that makes sense to consider as another product or vehicle. And I want to ask you something after hearing your response about that.
It's okay to invest in the stock market. That is a possibility. You need to look at your ability to invest in the market, your skill set. A lot of people say, you know what, I'm not so smart, so I'm just going to bet on the market. So I invest in just the S&P 500 index fund, and I just hope to do what the market's doing. So if that's what you're going to do, and you want to invest in the S&P and do what the market's going to do, then the thing that you have to think of is, when is the best time to invest in the stock market? When it's at its highs or when it's at its lows?
Right. It's at its lows. Yeah.
When it's at its lows. And what do people do? The exact opposite.
Yes. Yeah.
So you've got to be clear. I want to invest in the stock market when it's at its lows. Okay. When it's at its lows, I will invest. Today, the stock market is very high.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with cash. Cash is king. Having cash ready for opportunities is where people make killings.
Okay. I think that's refreshing to hear. It's a little frustrating sometimes because we see the cash and we see the whatever it is, 0.8% API or interest that we're earning on it. So it's like, it just seems like it's doing nothing. But I think to your point, there's hidden value in the strategic rollout or operation of that cash. That's sometimes just hard to see. Other thing I wanted to ask you is, and I just actually got into the interview and didn't finish it, your interview with Todd. I thought it was fascinating. I don't know what the exact wording of the question was, but he mentioned that people ask him, what stock should I put my money in to make money? His response is, that's the wrong question. It's really, what investment process do I need to develop to get me to where I want versus what the investment product actually is? That question resonated with me because a lot of times I feel like, even what you just said, I'm almost asking you, should I put my money in the stock market? Should I put my money in this particular product versus this particular product? And no one's a soothsayer, so you can't say. I'm curious on your thoughts of, I didn't finish the interview, so I don't know how the question really played out with the investment process, but I'm curious your thoughts on how I could start thinking about that differently.
So what you need to sit down and figure out is, what are our skill sets? Where do we have unique advantages? Where are our opportunities? Where can I leverage myself more? So we've talked a lot about your husband, and what we've been trying to talk about is, where can he get more leverage to up his income.
Mm-hmm.
That's one point. First, understand who you are, where you're at, what your skills are. Then the second step beyond that is to say, with my skill set and with what I want to do, where are the opportunities to invest and make money? What is the return that those things can do? And what is the risk of doing those things? And sit down and figure out for this investment, how does that all play out? So if I buy a commercial building, what are the risks of buying a commercial building? Someone can sue me. The tenant can blow the place up. Someone can fall on the place and I have to deal with that. I can't find tenants. Or the economy tanks, and now I'm only going to get 75% of the rent I thought I was going to get. Is that going to take you under? What's going to happen when those things happen? When it comes to the stock market, where is the stock market currently? Is it its highs or lows, right? And we talked about, you want to invest at its lows, but no one does that. Everyone at that point is fearful, me included. I made that mistake. The process is look at the opportunity, run the spreadsheets, figure out what are the chances of making money? What are the chances of losing money? What are my risks and how do I eliminate my risks?
Okay.
For you, I'm really focusing on commercial real estate because your husband's involved. He understands that business. So it's a unique skill set. What can he do to make that better? What I would do is I would go find the best commercial real estate agents in your area and I would study them. And I would go take them out for coffee and say, how did you do this? What is the opportunity? What should I be doing at my age? There are real estate agents in your area making killer money.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Right? $1 million a year is not outside the realm.
Right.
Some people say you should 10x your goal. So maybe the goal should be 10 million. Now you got to figure out how can I go make $1 million a year as a commercial real estate agent.
Yeah.
That solves all your problems.
I mean, it certainly does. That would be the quickest goal accomplished probably ever on my part or our part. That's funny. Okay. I'm trying to think if I have anything else to run your way.
So I have a question for you.
Sure.
If we sat down 3 years from now, what has to happen for you professionally, personally, and financially for you to be satisfied with your progress?
3 years from now. It's a little bit tough, but I want to see having cash in a bank, looking at your statement isn't the necessarily goal. The goal's beyond that. But what we've been doing the past couple of years is we have a spreadsheet going with every month we tally up our funds and just keep an eye on how things are growing and stuff. And so I think we started this 2 or 3 years ago. And so about 3 years ago. And it's a good reminder of like where we were and how far we've come. It's pretty powerful. It's been a nice ride, let's say, in terms of getting to the growth that we're at. So I would like to see continued growth in that same direction on the same spreadsheet 3 years from now. I don't have a target in mind, but I want to see that continue to grow. That would be promising to me that we're heading in the right direction. Career-wise, I have mixed feelings about where I am career-wise because I work from home, that's going to kind of automatically limit some of the things I'm capable of doing, especially at my current job, which I love, at current company, and I love our company. The people I work with are great. Our co-founders are great people, and that's kind of why I've been able to leverage that to work from home. But at the same time, I know that unless I were probably a technical genius and working in a more technical route, that there's not much I can do. I don't know, maybe this is an invisible script, but managing people from abroad is a little bit hard. I did that last year for about 6 months, and it was a pretty small team of just 2 reports. It worked. We made it work, so it's not like it's not possible. But I'm not sure how that's going to play out per se. So I don't really have anything specific with my career in mind, especially if I want to continue to work at our current company and continue to work from home. So I can't really answer that one. And what was the third item?
We said personally, professionally, and financially. So you've covered professionally kind of and financially.
Okay. Unfortunately, I don't know how else to answer the professional one. That's been difficult for me since I've been working, because I have some aspirations on one hand, but then on the other hand, I have a lot of scripts about like what I'm capable of doing, especially if I want to put my family first. So I'm like, maybe this is more of a modern female issue than it is for other guys, but I think it's a family issue nonetheless. Personally, yeah, I don't know about personally. I mean, I think ultimately it would be great to earn side income doing something that I'm good at and leveraging that towards our ultimate goals. I worry about like being cash obsessed, because in one sense, like this goal is like sort of that. On the same hand, like I understand that if you work for the money, you're not gonna have everything else might ultimately suffer. I don't want to go down the money route per se, but I feel like I come from the not the abundance mindset. I come from like the limited mindset. And so it's still hard for me to not think about cash flow and to not think about earnings versus anything else for personal growth aside from family, because I do want to spend time working on my kids and like working on myself and continuing to better myself. I understand from what I hear, at least, if you have a job that you're into or hobby or something that you value as a parent, then that's good for your kids as well. That's the part of me I'm kind of not in touch with.
Okay.
Said a lot of things there, so feel free to distill.
Let's hit the easy one. You're doing really well and better than most people with your cash situation. What I would do is just say 3 years from now, I would just chart it out and say, if we continue down this path, where are we going to be in 3 years? Where am I going to be in 5? Where am I going to be in 10? Chart it out, project it out, and have it with your other spreadsheet so you can say, here are the projections, here's the reality, we're going down this path. Having financial stability and having financial abundance changes the way you look at everything. When you're sitting there with a couple $1,000,000 in the bank, you're like, I can do anything I want. Yeah, I can stroke a check for my kids' college. I can go to a nice dinner. We can go to Hawaii. We do whatever we want. It gives you the freedom to enjoy abundance. That one's pretty simple for you.
Okay.
I understand the job mom thing is a struggle. So you're having one. Are you planning on having more?
Yeah, that's the idea right now, as of now.
Okay. So having a bunch of kids is a job unto itself.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with wanting to be the best mom ever. And it sounds like right now, with a stay-at-home job, you've got no commute time. If you can build in systems to get your work done faster, quicker, and deliver the results that you are without spending as much time as you have to, I would focus on that so you have the time and the freedom to do the other things you want. I think that's about systematizing the way you do things. I think that's what Tim Ferriss wrote about in 4-Hour Workbook.
Yeah.
It's not that he's working 4 hours, but he's systematizing it. If there's routine stuff that you're doing that's repetitive that you can either automate or send out to a virtual assistant, I would. Even if it costs you money on your own. If you can trade an hour of your time at work to a virtual assistant who works for $10 an hour, it's worth it.
Yeah.
You've got to figure out for yourself, where is that balance? And what does it mean to you? And where do you want it to be? And then work towards it. You've already shown yourself when you set a goal, you achieve it. You already know that. I know you can achieve goals. It's clear cut. So you just need to figure out where you're going and what that goal is for yourself in motherhood and work, and just go start achieving it. If you want to create side income, trying to create a side job, side income with 2 kids under 5 and a full-time job is difficult.
Got it.
The only thing I would say along those lines is look at what your husband is doing, and are there opportunities within that to create a side income that are easy, quick, that take very little effort, but there's that low-hanging fruit for the picking because he's already doing something else.
Okay.
For your job, the biggest thing you can do is say, what are the biggest, it sounds like you're pretty close to top management ownership, correct? As far as the people who work there?
Mm-hmm.
What are their biggest issues, and what are the things that they're trying to solve that they don't want to deal with that I could solve remotely without much effort and provide them massive value?
Okay. That's a good question. Fortunately, I've got like a little bit of a promotion, but a role change that allows me to think in that manner a little bit more strategically. The previous role I was in was more technical and project focused, which was it's hard when you're knee deep in a project to step outside that and think bigger picture. So I think where I am now, I really can't afford to think about that, and that's kind of part of what I'm supposed to be doing anyway. Yeah, that's something that I can certainly do. And the point of that would be what? Just to continue to add value to my
correct
colleagues, and
your value is going to go up. Your raises are going to go up, and the amount of things that they entrust to you will go up. You just need to make sure you keep your balance between your time and your work and your child.
Okay.
People who solve problems and get stuff done are the ones who everyone goes to. That brings up your social capital. That brings up your work capital. That brings up your ability to set your own goals.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
So you've got a bunch of action steps. Most of your action steps are around thinking about where you're going, putting some stuff to spreadsheets, looking at some different areas, figuring out what you're going to do with your child, your parents. I think we covered most of the things that you had talked about.
Yeah, I think we have too. Okay, cool. That's awesome.
Any last questions?
No, we've covered a lot of stuff. We've covered a lot of big picture and strategic things for us to think about. So I'm super appreciative of that. I can tell you without thinking, without doing any deep thought, that my next questions are surrounding how to do some of these things. I think that's something I probably need to try out on my own first.
So that's kind of where coaching comes in. When people have the big picture where they know where they're going, then it's always nice to have somebody stand aside of you who knows your big picture, knows all your things, and can help you just create the steps that you need to take, hold you accountable to the steps, make sure that your steps are in alignment with what you say your goals are, and help to add and bring you the different pieces you need to do things so that you don't have to spend hours trying to figure out how do I take this next step. It brings it down quick, and they provide the tools to do that. So it's something for you to think about.
Certainly. Okay. Cool.
Thank you for joining us, and it was a pleasure having you on today, and I think we learned a lot about you, and it sounds like you've got a bunch of things to go out and crush, and it sounds like your goal of $1 million is already achieved, and you're going to have to hike that up a little bit.
That's a problem I'm happy to fix, or happy to have. Definitely appreciate your time, Rocky. It was nice chatting with you. I suggest anyone who listens to this podcast to take Rocky up on your offer, if you're still offering the...
We stopped offering them for free.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Now they have to pay, but
Got it.
You got to be quick sometimes in life.
Yeah, well, for sure. I do appreciate talking to you and your time today. So thank you.
Thank you too. For Lindsey, this coaching session is just one step along a journey. She has a lot of choices to make that will allow her to have the success she wants. Continuing to work on her journey will allow her the abundance she desires. What about you? What action can you take to achieve your goals? By the way, can you do me a favor? I'd love to hear from you about future topics you would like me to cover, and also how you are doing on your journey. And if you have any questions, please email me. It's Rocky@Richer Soul. Thanks for listening.